Your reaction to this news?
Well, Jay, as much as it's sad, we were expecting this news for quite some time. His condition has been worsening, and by following the social media post put forth by his family, his daughter, for example, daily posting updates on what his condition was, we were expecting this, but it's still shocking to know that a man of such importance to the most popular sport in the world has left us. He has left us in body, but his legend will just continue to grow as it did ever since he stepped foot on a football pitch.
Fernando, you've been around this game of soccer for a long time. What did Pelé mean to you?
Well, he was an icon. He was everything that growing up you wanted to strive for. He was the trademark of what a great player was. You wanted to be Pelé when you were growing up. Now, I'm stating my age here at this time, but when I started running around a soccer ball, I only knew that Pelé was the biggest player that ever lived. And from then on, you kind of wanted to do everything that he did. You wanted to imitate his moves. You wanted to become that. You called the best players on your neighborhood team or your high school team or your amongst your friends. You called them the Pelé of that team. He was the trademark of what a great player was for me growing up. And then came Maradona, and then came Messi. But everybody just following on the footsteps of the king of the sport. And his importance and the relevance of those four letters to the sport are to be studied in profound ways, because he transcended the game. He became an ambassador for the sport in places where sports in general did not set foot. He was able to bring that to a continent like Africa in the late 1960s and early 1970s and shed light on the fact that they were fanatics of the sport in that region of the world as well.
Go deeper into that, if you wouldn't mind. How you said those four letters and the places that they went. How was he able to do that, to be that?
Well, he went on the back of the growth of television and the platforms for communication that were set forth for him to take advantage of as well. In the 1960s, satellite television was coming about. Therefore, soccer games were being able to be seen in many regions of the world, where before you could only read about the sport in old newspapers or old magazines. And Pelé was the one player that led a generation that took advantage of the growth of television. 1962, the World Cup in Chile. That World Cup was broadcast to more countries than it had ever been before. And even though Pelé did not play, the scenes of him sitting on the stands caught attention to the world. 1970, the first World Cup to be broadcast in color to the world. And Pelé was there, shining in one of the best teams that ever played the game. And then he playing for Santos, he became a national treasure in Brazil. Now when we listen about multi-million-dollar transfer fees from one player going from one league to the other, Pelé was such a national icon and a treasure in Brazil that he was pretty much forbidden to leave the country or to play anywhere else but in his native São Paulo, in his native Santos club. That was the only team he ever played for in Brazil, but he traveled the world with that team. He became like a traveling circus show, playing in countries where they had only heard of a player like Pelé. And again, he traveled Africa in campaigning as well for who ended up becoming later on the president of FIFA, João Avelange, but showing himself to an area of the world and trying to shed light on regions that before his time were seldom seen at.
Fernando, for the younger generation that did not get to see him play, what should they know about Pelé's game?
Well, Pelé is football. Pelé is soccer. He is the quintessential definition of the game. He was aggressive, artistic, and aggressive at the same time. He would get into scuffles in as much as he would try to just get away from you with this beautiful flow of playing the game. We know the beautiful game, the phrase comes from jogo bonito, which is in Brazil it's what it translates to, beautiful game. He was the dancer that samba schools were trying to teach when they went out into the carnival in February, but he did it with a football right next to his foot. He was elegant. He was a great passer, a great acrobat. I mean, how many times have we seen those back heels or back flips that he did to score with even with Cosmos, landing on artificial, AstroTurf pitches as they were back in the early 1970s. He would do that. He would create scenes that were only imagined by many of the mortals that played the game, and he just took the sport to another level. He was not only those four letters, but the two numbers in the back of his jersey, the number 10. Anybody that wears the number 10 did so after him, knowing that the great Pele had worn that number in his teams, and with the responsibility to at least amount to a small percentage of what Pele was on the field to his teammates.
I don't want to ask you a yes or no question, but I may have to. Is there anyone that you see now, the greats of the game, the modern game today, where you see some of Pele's spirit out on the pitch, even today?
Well, if you think about how athletes, or in this case soccer players, have transcended their sport to become bigger than what they are on the football field, there's very few that would amount to what Pele did back in his time. I'm always a defender of the fact that the beautiful game is so big that we cannot single out the best player of all time and create that GOAT figure to stand alone above everybody else. I think there's players that dominate the generation, and then there's players that dominate in that generation, just live throughout the times without ever diminishing the light that they shed on a football field. And Pelé is one of them. After him came Maradona, and after Maradona is Messi. There's very few that would amount to what Pelé signified to the sport. Players that could grab the attention of anybody that did not have to follow the game day in and day out. Those are the type of players that transcend the sport, and Pelé did so. He was an ambassador of the most beautiful game.
ESPN soccer announcer Fernando Palomo, remembering Pelé. We appreciate your time, Fernando, and your thoughts and everything that you've told us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay.
Well, Pele, the only man to win 3 World Cups. In the 60s and the 70s, he rivaled Muhammad Ali as the most popular and most recognizable athlete on the planet, has died after a long battle with cancer. Pelé was just 82 years old. Our SportsCenter coverage of his death continues.